My husband gave his mistress the life I built. A Korean Mafia boss gave me the empire she could never touch. Soleil, East Terrace, Champagne. Now, already moving. I want you to hold that image for a second. Somewhere across that same ballroom, under 400 crystals of the most expensive chandelier I had ever stood beneath. My husband was slow dancing with my best friend, and I was carrying a silver tray. I had worked the Harrington Grand for 3 years. Every black tie gala, every charity dinner, every corporate celebration that required invisible hands and perfect service. I was good at my job the way some people are good at surviving, completely, quietly, and without anyone noticing the cost. What I did not know, moving through that crowd with my tray and my calibrated smile, was that the most dangerous man in that ballroom had already been watching me for 40 minutes. He had already decided something. I just did not know it yet. The Harrington Legacy Gala was the event of the year. 600 guests, 3 months of logistics, flowers imported from the Netherlands, a string quartet that cost more than my monthly rent. I had memorized the floor plan, the seating chart, the pour sequence for every course. My husband Dominic had told me to meet him at the main entrance at 9 o'clock. Come find me at 9, baby. Like I was a guest he was accommodating. Like 4 years of marriage had produced a woman he needed to schedule. I finished my East Terrace rotation at 8:53. I fixed my hair in a silver service cart reflection. I walked toward the main ballroom, and there, under the chandelier I had watched maintenance hang with a laser level, was Dominic, dancing with Renata. Not a polite event dance, not a colleague's dance. The kind that has its own gravity, its own language, its own specific forgetting of everything outside itself. His hand on the small of her back, her head tilted toward his shoulder, her red dress moving like she had worn it specifically to be seen. Renata, my maid of honor, the woman who had cried at my wedding, with tears I had believed, entirely and without question were joy. I stood at the ballroom entrance for 11 seconds. I know because the east wall clock had a second hand, and I needed something to look at that was not them. Then a server bumped my shoulder. A champagne flute tilted. Someone said, "Excuse me, ma'am." And I was back, in my body, in my uniform, on my feet. I did not cross the ballroom floor. I did not make a scene. I turned around, walked back to the service corridor, picked up my tray, and finished my shift. Because I had learned, long before that night, that my devastation was something I only allowed on my own time. Drop your city in the comments right now. Because if you have ever had to hold yourself completely together while your entire world was ending, I need you to know I see you. And what happened in that corridor 12 minutes later was something I could not have written if I had tried. I was reloading near the kitchen entrance when the atmosphere changed. Not a sound, a shift. The specific pressure that enters a room when someone with a certain kind of authority decides to occupy it. The corridor went quiet. Not gradually, immediately. 2 servers who had been laughing stopped mid-sentence. A kitchen manager who had been barking orders lowered his voice without being asked. Even the ambient noise from the ballroom seemed to pull back slightly, like the room itself was making space. I looked up. He was standing at the corridor entrance in a black suit that had never been off a rack in its life. Korean. Early 40s. Ink on his neck. Not decorative, the kind that means something in rooms most people are never allowed to enter. 2 men flanked him at a distance that was precise enough to be intentional, close enough to be permanent. He was not looking at them. He was looking at me. Not the way men look at women in hotel corridors. Something else. Something that processed and assessed and filed without revealing a single conclusion. You adjusted the pour sequence on the East Terrace, he said. The speeches ran long. Nobody told you to adjust. You just read the room. I stared at him. I watch how people work, he said. It tells me more than anything they would say. His name, I would learn, was Shin Jae-won. He handed me a card. Plain, heavy stock. Just a name and a number. My hospitality director resigned, he said. I've been in that ballroom for 2 hours looking for someone who understands what that position actually requires. A pause. You understand it. He walked away. Behind him, the corridor slowly remembered how to breathe. I stood holding his card and understood, without being able to explain why, that something had just shifted in a direction I could not yet see the end of. I drove to my grandmother Celestine's house that night. South Side. Wind chimes on the porch. Cedar and coffee smell that had meant safe since I was 4 years old. She was awake. She was always awake when I needed her. I told her everything. The dance, the chandelier, the 11 seconds. Renata's red dress. She listened without interrupting. Her stillness, the specific kind she reserved for things that mattered most. When I finished, she poured coffee and sat across from me. "How long have you known?" she said. "Tonight," I said. She looked at me. "Celestine." "How long?" she said again. I looked at my cup. "I think I've known for a year," I said finally. "I just didn't let myself know that I knew." She nodded slowly. The difference between knowing and letting yourself know is usually whatever you've been too afraid to lose. I called my cousin Tasha that night. Paralegal. Sharp. The woman who had told me on 3 separate occasions, "Call me the moment you need me." What Tasha found over 4 days was not a betrayal. It was a plan. The joint savings, drawn down 40% over 7 months, increments small enough that the statements looked unremarkable. The apartment lease renewal, signed 2 weeks prior. One name, his. The catering business I had built from a folding table and a borrowed mixer, and 2 years of cultivated contacts, restructured into a sole proprietorship, his name only. And registered, Tasha told me on the phone in a voice carefully controlled, to an address I did not recognize. Renata's address. He had taken the business I built from nothing, and signed it into the hands of a woman who had never built a single thing in her life. I sat with that for exactly 1 day. Then I called Shin Jae-won. His offices were in a building downtown, with his family's name on nothing visible, and his fingerprints on everything, structural. The lobby security called up without being asked. The elevator required a code I was given at the desk. His assistant, a composed woman named Minjung, who communicated in precise half-sentences, showed me in immediately. No waiting. I registered that. He was at his window when I entered, the city below him like something he had already accounted for. He turned. "You called," he said. "You offered," I said. Something moved in his expression. The acknowledgement of a correct move on a board he had been playing longer than I had. I laid out my professional history in 12 minutes, every venue, every system I had designed, improved or salvaged, what I had built and what had been taken, and the precise legal difference between the two. When I finished, he was quiet. "Why me specifically?" he said. "Because you watched a woman in a service corridor and saw a director," I said. "Everyone else in that ballroom saw a waitress." The quiet that followed was the kind that means something is being permanently decided. Full operational authority. 4 properties. The Harrington account is one of them. "I know what I'm walking into," I said. "No," he said, not unkindly. "You don't. Not yet." His eyes held mine without pressure, without performance. "But I think you're someone who figures things out without being told twice." He extended his hand. I shook it. What I did not know then. 2 of the men who had been in that corridor were already stationed outside my apartment building. Shin Jae-won had decided I needed protection before I had thought to want it. That was how he operated. Always 3 moves ahead, always quiet about it. The first week inside Shin Jae-won's organization taught me something nobody had warned me about. It was not the underworld connections that required adjustment. It was the people who had been comfortable before I arrived. A senior operations manager named Prescott, who had been running the Harrington account on inherited habit and personal authority for 6 years. He submitted my first scheduling revision back to me with handwritten corrections. He booked vendors I had already replaced. He told 3 staff members that my appointment was temporary. I documented everything. I said nothing. On day 11, I presented Prescott's department numbers against the revised operational model to Shin Jae-won directly. Shin looked at the numbers for approximately 30 seconds. He picked up his phone. He made 1 call. He said 4 words in Korean I did not understand. Prescott was reassigned to a storage facility in another city before noon. Nobody explained it. Nobody announced it. He was simply gone. and a new operations coordinator appeared the following morning, who introduced herself by saying, "Mrs. Soleil, what do you need first?" That was when I understood the specific texture of the world I had entered. Shin Jae-won did not raise his voice. He did not make threats. He made phone calls. And things that needed to change, changed. I built the new operational systems across all 4 properties in 10 weeks. New vendor relationships, new service standards, new event protocols that actually reflected how luxury clients moved through a space versus how the old management imagined they did. I was in before everyone and out after everyone, and I did not mind any of it because every single thing I was building had my name on it. I found out through Dija, my best server, who knew everyone and catalogued everything, that Renata had called the Harringtons' events department, attempting to poach 2 of my senior vendors. She had introduced herself as the director of a new catering enterprise. The vendors, both of whom I had personally renegotiated contracts with the month prior, had declined. Then she appeared at a private dinner I was managing. The Callaway Foundation annual charity event. 200 guests, black tie, the kind of room where names mattered. She gave her name at the entrance confidently, the way people do when they have never actually been turned away from anything. Security checked the list, checked it again. "I'm sorry, ma'am. You're not on the guest register." She asked for a manager. I was the manager. I was told she had been redirected to the lobby by the time I reached the entrance. But she had been there long enough to see, through the open ballroom doors, the room I was running, the staff moving on my signal, the event unfolding exactly as designed. She called me that night. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 3 minutes long. I listened to it once. It contained, in order, an explanation, a justification, an accusation, and then at the very end, in a voice I barely recognized, something close to a question. "How are you doing this?" I deleted it. I was too busy to answer questions from women who were failing with things that had never been theirs. Dominic arrived at the Harrington on a Thursday. I was doing a final walkthrough after a private dinner. The same marble floors, the same chandeliers, everything stripped to its bones after 600 guests had gone home. Just me and my clipboard and the satisfying quiet of a room that had gone exactly right. The service entrance opened. He looked like a man who had prepared a speech and was already losing faith in it. "I heard you're running this now," he said. "I manage it," I said, "among other properties." He looked around the room, at the chandeliers, at the architecture, and I watched him recalculate in real time. I had seen that expression on his face before. It was the expression he wore when something was not going according to plan. "The business transfer. I want to explain. Your name opened doors," I said quietly. "You always said that." "You were right. Your name opened doors. My work kept them open. Those are 2 different contributions, and for 4 years I only got credit for one of them." He was quiet. "Soleil." "I'm not angry, Dominic," I said. "Anger would mean I was still waiting for something from you." I went back to my clipboard. He stood there for a moment, the way men stand when they expected a scene and don't know how to exit the one they got. Then the service door at the far end of the room opened. 2 men in dark suits entered and positioned themselves near the walls without a word. They did not look at Dominic directly. They did not need to. Dominic looked at them. Then at me. Something moved across his face that I had never seen there before. Fear, not of confrontation. Something older and more animal than that. The specific fear of a man who has suddenly understood that the woman he dismissed is standing inside a protection he cannot calculate or counter. He left without finishing his sentence. The 2 men waited until he was through the door, then exited the way they had come. Shin Jae-won called me 20 minutes later. "He won't come back," he said. "What did you do?" I had someone explain to him that the Harrington is a private facility. A pause. And that the man who owns 3 of the properties, feeding his firm's commercial contracts, would prefer he found other venues for his personal conversations. I understood then that Dominic had not just seen 2 men in dark suits. He had seen a wall he could not climb over, go around, or pretend was not there. Shin Jae-won came to my office on a Friday morning. He sat across from me without preamble and looked at me with those calibrated eyes. "How are you actually doing?" he said. "Not the properties, you." I opened my mouth for the professional answer. Instead, I said, "Some days I don't recognize the woman who let it go on that long. That's harder than the betrayal itself." He was quiet for a moment. "Grief for who you were before you knew better," he said, "is the most expensive kind." I looked at him. "You sound like you know." Something moved behind his eyes. Not pain. The scar tissue over pain, which is a different thing, and worse. "I built all of this," he said, "because I needed somewhere to put the energy that had nowhere left to go. After. He did not say after what. He did not need to. We sat in that office for a moment longer, in the specific quiet of two people who have both paid for their understanding in currencies they would not have chosen. Then he said, "The LLC with your business in it. My legal team found a filing error in the restructuring. It invalidates the transfer. The air changed. J1, it was already yours," he said. "I just made sure the paperwork agreed." I did not know how to receive that. I had spent months learning to receive nothing from the person who owed me everything. I did not yet know how to receive something from a man who owed me nothing at all. "Why?" I said. He looked out my window at the city. "Because you rebuilt 4 properties in 10 weeks, he said. "Because you adjusted the champagne rotation without being told. "Because you finished your shift the night your world ended." He turned back to me. "That is not a woman who should have anything taken from her. That is a woman who should have everything returned." Something in my chest broke open. Not collapsed. The opposite. The specific release of something held too tightly for far too long, finally being allowed to breathe. 6 months later, the catering LLC that had been registered to Renata's address filed for voluntary dissolution. I found out through Tasha, who sent me the filing with 1 line of text. She couldn't hold it. I did not celebrate. I was in the middle of a contract negotiation for a 5th property. My grandmother, Celestine, attended the signing ceremony for my named partnership stake in the Shin J1 Hospitality Group. She stood in the entrance of the building and looked at the city below and then at me. She took my face in both her hands. "You know what's different about you now," she said. "What?" "You used to make yourself invisible so other people could shine." She looked at me steadily. "Look at what shines when you stop." I looked. She was right. Dominic had given Renata the life I built. Every account, every contact, every structure assembled from nothing, handed to a woman who had never built anything and did not know how to hold it when it started to slip. She could not hold it. Of course she could not. You cannot sustain something you did not build. You do not know where the foundations are. You do not know which walls are load-bearing. You do not know what to do when something cracks, because you were never there for the part where it was built strong enough to crack in the first place. I signed the partnership documents on a Tuesday morning. My name. On the founding structure, in permanent ink, the empire she could never touch. And when the pen left the paper, I thought about a woman in a service corridor in a hotel uniform, carrying a silver tray and 11 seconds of the worst knowledge of her life, who turned around, picked up the tray, and went back to work. She did not know what she was carrying. She just kept going. That, I have come to understand, was always the answer. Not the rage, not the confrontation, not the dramatic exit under the chandelier. The going back to work. The refusing to let what was taken from her be the last thing anyone wrote about her. The understanding, quiet, absolute, unshakable, that a woman who builds things once will simply build again. And the second time, she will know to put her own name on the foundation before anyone else gets the chance. If this story stayed with you, if you have ever built something with your hands and watched someone sign their name above yours, subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments. Tell me the moment you knew. Tell me the moment you stopped waiting for recognition and started building anyway. This channel exists for every woman who kept going when she had every reason to stop. More is coming. Stay with me.